Hello everyone, this is the Fight or Flight podcast. My name is Lanray, and in this episode I will be reviewing some of the results from UFC 254, specifically the fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Justin Gaethje, as well as Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier. I'm going to start with the Khabib versus Justin fight. Now, in the previous episode, I recorded a preview where I previewed how I saw the fight going and what I thought would happen. And it went almost exactly the way that I thought. Now, having said that, I was blown away by the performance. In that podcast, I had said that I could only see Justin getting maybe a 70-30 chance of actually winning the fight, but I thought that it would be, almost a repeat performance of like a Dustin Poirier or an Edson Barbosa, and that was kind of what we saw. But even I wasn't ready for what I saw. It was one of the greatest performances I've ever seen, and I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. I think when you take everything in totality, so not just the fight, but the pressure coming into the fight, the fact that he had lost his dad, the retirement, the broken foot, the staph infection, all that information that came out after the fact, to go out and just dominate the way that he did, it was just incredible to watch. It was just, I don't know if there's any other way for me to describe it. Let me do a quick overview of the fight itself. So in the first round, when the fight started, you saw Khabib and Justin be very cagey, trying to feel each other out. There was a filling out process where there wasn't a lot of action going on in that initial part. But I would say something like 2 minutes into the fight, there was a point where Justin landed a low kick, a calf kick, and you could see almost that Khabib was like, okay, it's time to start going. And at that point, he started applying a type of pressure, which is something that we've heard, all the time about Khabib is, he has a relentless style. He has a, pressure that, people just don't understand until they're actually in there with him. And it's like he suffocates you. And a lot of times that pressure people think is just the pressure once he takes you down. The chain wrestling that goes into one takedown after another. And then while you're escaping using this technique, he's chaining it and he's switching, from a double leg to a single to a, body lock. And so that pressure we barely ever get to see in the stand-up, because most times pretty early he's able to get people to the ground. In this fight, he was, I felt like he was making a point to not take Justin down right away. And he applied the pressure and said, we are going to stand and we're going to, you think you're better than me. In the stand-up, everybody says you're better than me, let's see it. And it was just an incredible performance. Even on the feet, I felt like he started applying the pressure on Justin. Justin had incredible footwork, which is one of the things that he's done, way better recently is just that his footwork, he's not been there to hit. And Khabib was constantly trying to cut him off. And if you've been in a fight, especially if you watch a lot of these UFC fights, one of the ways that people can negate somebody applying that type of pressure is, one, either you counter as they come in. That's actually assuming that the person is not just pressuring but throwing strikes as well with the pressure, and then you wait for them and then you counter. In this case, Khabib wasn't necessarily reckless with throwing punches. He was just staying on him and closing the distance. So it also put the emphasis on Justin to try to then, if you're waiting for the shot or the punch so you can counter it, and it doesn't come when you think it's going to come, then you're just waiting and you're trying to react to everything that he does. If it's a feint, you're reacting. If he actually comes in and throws a punch, you're reacting. If he's just closing the distance, you're reacting. And so it didn't give Justin the space, like the space that he had against Tony Ferguson, for example, to be able to read and react at his own time. He wasn't able to control the fight, essentially. And so Khabib took the center of the octagon and was pressuring Justin. And Justin would try to circle out. But, a couple of things. One, that takes a lot of energy. To constantly have to circle out, it takes a lot of energy. And you're constantly, trying not to get caught your hips square. So imagine you're circling out, it'll come to a point where if the person is cutting you off at an angle and you're trying to get out of that angle faster, the only way you can do it is almost like hop back or switch stances to get out of that position. But once you switch your stance, there's a point there where you then become square, right? Your hips become square and you're facing Khabib as well, so that means it's easier for him to shoot in, and he has your hips square and he can start, going for a takedown. But I was very surprised that he did not try to go for a takedown right away. He did not even try to go for a takedown until, pretty late in the first round. Like, I think he did go for one, but it wasn't the relentless type one. I felt like it was just one to give Justin something to think about, to remind him of the threat. And Justin had mentioned that he's going to create a space in front of him where Khabib has to walk through if he's going to get to him, and it's going to be carnage and chaos. And Khabib said, I'm ready to walk through this carnage. Like, Justin got some pretty good shots in. He hit Khabib. There were a few times where he went to the body, went up top, and he had a little bit of success landing strikes. Part of the problem is when you're, constantly being backed up and you're moving backwards and throwing punches, it's not the same type of power as if you're moving forward. And we saw that this was a strategy Khabib used somewhat in the Edson Barbosa fight, where he just kept the pressure on him and Barbosa was moving backwards, landing leg kicks, but ultimately not able to have the same type of power that he would have if he was coming forward with the punches, right? So Khabib took some good shots, and that's another thing that we've seen. A lot of people always talk about, some of the shots that he's taken, but it's also because we barely get to see anything, so we have few moments in these fights where somebody does something and you're like, it looks like they might have got him there, and so a lot of times we hold on to those moments and say, oh, look at this, like the Al Quinta fight, like the Michael Johnson punch, like the Dustin Poirier guillotine. These brief moments where people have seconds and windows of opportunities because we just don't see Khabib make any mistakes at all, and so in this fight in particular, I thought he was phenomenal from start to finish. And again, with the pressure on Justin backing up, he didn't have as many. The power wasn't there as much even when he would hit. And I'm not saying that these things weren't hurting Khabib, but there wasn't anything that he couldn't walk through, right? And so Khabib just kept coming forward. And Khabib has really good reflexes. Like, even when he's getting punched, he has a really good ability to roll with the punches as they come. And so it also negates the effect. It's not as impactful as, some of the punches that you'll get if you don't see them coming, right? So, I thought Khabib was really good with that. The other thing that backing and backing Justin up and that pressure did was it also, you could see that Justin, especially by the second round, and I'll get to the second round in a second, but even by the end of the first, you could see that he was getting tired. And not tired in the sense that he couldn't fight, like he was gassed and exhausted. You could just tell that there was a toll. And it was because, again, he wasn't able to fight at the pace that he wanted. He kept backing up and he was just in reaction mode. Because Khabib was backing him up and throwing and feinting and feinting level changes. And so Justin was just constantly trying to react, and he was overloading him with information, right? Like, okay, I'm going to, feint a level change, and you're going to have to worry about getting ready to sprawl your hips and getting ready to defend a takedown. Then I'm going to throw an overhook. Then I'm hitting you with my jab. It was just, as a fan watching the fight, I was blown away by the strategy to begin with, because it's one thing to pressure Justin and then shoot for the takedown, because one of the things that Justin had said was he wasn't going to stay behind the two black lines, and a lot of this fight ended up being fought behind the two black lines, and Khabib didn't shoot for it, and a lot of times when anybody's behind those two black lines, he goes for it right away. And initially at the very start of the fight, I thought maybe he didn't want to set it up, he didn't want to shoot too early because Justin could anticipate it, and maybe, hit him with a knee or something as he's coming in. But I don't think it was that. He just wanted to show that if it comes to stand-up, he's also good at this, right? And he's well-rounded. And so by the end of the first round, with about a minute to go, Justin had been landing some really good leg kicks. Let me say that. I don't think I've mentioned that to this point. Justin landed some really good leg kicks. You could see there was redness around Khabib's leg. And like I mentioned, we found out later on afterwards that he had broken his 2 toes in his leg, and he had broken some bones in his feet, and that he had also suffered from mumps early on in the week. Javier Mendez had said that on Sunday, which is when I'm recording this, so a day after the fight, that those were some of the difficulties that they had. And so even with the leg kicks, you could see that they were, I wouldn't say they were having an impact in terms of hindering Khabib's mobility, but they had an impact in terms of just you could see some damage in the legs, and you could see that even as he was landing some of these kicks, just the impact when he would land them themselves, you would see maybe the next step Khabib takes would be to the side, or his balance would be a little bit faulted after the kick. So these were landing, and these were hard kicks. But even with that, like I think, like I was saying, with a minute left in the first round, one of the things that you saw was that Khabib got into an exchange with Justin, and then from that shoots, like this is right by the fence, so shoots, gets him down. I think it was a double leg, gets him down, scoops him up, and the speed at which he was able to transition to mount from the double leg. I'm talking about it, like, I think by the time Justin got down, it was 40 seconds, and then by the end of the round, he was already in the submission, and he was pretty, he looked like if he had some more time, he could have finished it there. And so that just again, I said this in the breakdown, on the ground, once he takes you to the ground, he is peerless, right? And I knew, and I mentioned it, that, the thing people talk about is the takedown. But once he takes you down, he is on a totally different level from everybody else, including Justin. And that was reinforced as soon as he took him down. As soon as he took him down, it took him no time at all to transition from the double leg, tied up Justin's legs in the way that we usually see Khabib tie up people's legs with his own legs, grabbed his arm, and then started shifting him into the fence, and distorting his balance, so he ended up lying flat, transitioned straight away from tying up his legs into full mount, and then went for the submission, but just didn't have enough time, and that was the end of the first round. So after watching that first round in lifetime, you're still thinking, okay, you took all this time to get the takedown, and more importantly, you weren't even really trying for the takedown. And now let's see how the second round starts. And at the end of the first round, they cut to Justin's corner, Trevor Whitman, and they're just talking to him, telling him to try to slow it down, trying to keep going on those leg kicks, and that essentially he should keep going, and it's working, right? And so I remember looking at that and thinking to myself, how is he going to slow it down? I think what Trevor was trying to tell him was, because Justin had gotten into this frantic, exchanges with Khabib, where Khabib is backing him up and feinting and throwing punches and kicks as well. Justin was reacting, but his reactions were not calm necessarily. They were frantic. And so I think that was what Trevor was trying to tell him, is, slow it down. So like, try to look, take better inventory of what you're actually seeing when he's attacking you, and not just swinging, wild hooks, which is what Justin was doing primarily. I would have, and obviously Trevor Whitman is an incredible coach. This is not me saying, this is not a criticism in any way, and he probably said this as part of the part that we didn't see. I thought Justin should have used more uppercuts, because at least, if Khabib is coming in lenient, if you're worried about him taking you down an uppercut which comes from the bottom and comes up would be able to meet him down if he was changing levels, in fact, right? And it would be better in these exchanges if, even if you weren't hitting, but he wasn't hitting you, and you hit him, but you gave him something to think about, it might have been better. Honestly, I don't think it would have done anything to help, to be honest. And this is a feature of all Khabib fights. One of the most consistent things in all of his fights is the panic that he creates in his opponents. That frantic pace, that frantic nature that where they start swinging, they stop with the game plan. You've seen it with now Justin. You saw it with Dustin Poirier. You saw it with Michael Johnson. You saw it with Edson Barbosa. Where these guys just get into a thing and they're just like, man, what is going on right now? What is going on right now? And it's just game plan goes and you kind of resort to what you know. And the thing that we knew from Justin was getting into these wild exchanges. But Khabib, again, different animal, and so the second round begins. And it's more of the same. Khabib is again pressuring, and at this point you can begin to see that Justin is slowing down. And a lot of these things Khabib said, he said, let's see him at the end of the first round. Let's see when he comes out in the second round, and he's not going to be the same person. And he wasn't the same person. Like he still landed a few. He landed some really good kicks. But Khabib didn't wait till 1 minute left in the round. This time he after the first minute, Justin landed two really good leg kicks in two, exchanges. And on the second one, Khabib is like, as soon as he lands it, he grabs a hold of the leg, transitions into a takedown, and Justin tries to sprawl. And while he's trying to sprawl, Khabib circles. So he lunges in on a double leg, and he's turning around, like trying to turn around Justin. And as Justin is trying to sprawl to get his balance and to push away, Khabib is able to turn the corner and grab a hold of his back, right? He locks him, he gets into a body lock, turns the corner, grabs a hold of the back, and in one smooth motion he goes from getting his back to transitioning, getting a hold of Justin's back, getting Justin to then plant his hands on the mat, and then from there he's able to transition straight away from a back take to a full mount. And it's one of the most beautiful things as far as like jiu-jitsu play you're going to see. The transition was just effortless, and that there are a million little details in terms of head position, leg position, all the things that he does. And we've seen some of this in the way Justin defends takedowns in the past, where he almost waits for you to lock in, the submission, and then lock in the submission, and then he begins to try to fight it out. And I think in this one, when he sees that Khabib is going for, initially what looked like a triangle, he probably thought he would be able to carry him up and slam him. And you could just see the adjustment that Khabib made, where he puts his hand underneath Justin's knees, so that way he doesn't have any leverage to be able to raise himself up and slam Khabib into the mat. Just a fantastic performance. And then to follow that up with, everything that happened after the fact. So if you don't know, after the fight, Khabib announced that this would be his last fight and he's going to retire. I was really sad. I'll be honest. Like, I was watching the fight and I was just in shock. First of all, I was in awe by what I had just seen, the fight I had just seen. And, again, the idea that this was supposed to be his toughest test, as what a lot of people had said, and just making it look effortless. He finished him in 2 rounds, in less than 2 rounds. He finished him, with like, I don't know the exact time, but I don't imagine that it was up to 2 minutes into the second round. And he dominated from start to finish. It was flawless. And I was just in awe of what I had just watched. And then to go from that to seeing him so emotional on the mat, crying, and to see Justin come over and talk to him, and Trevor Whitman come over and talk to him. or just, acknowledge him, and then to see him take off his glove. And even at that point, I kept thinking to myself, no, come on, maybe he just really wants to get the gloves off or something. Like, I was just in disbelief to see him go from that to, this is his last fight, and he promises mom he's not gonna fight. I was sad, man. I was sad. And I feel like part of the reasons why we love the sport, if you love MMA, I've heard a lot of people talk about, MMA is about respect. And that's true. MMA is about respect. It's also about competition. But I think in the rare athletes, someone like Khabib, someone like, GSP, some of these people who make you feel some of these things, it's knowing that, the amount of work that goes into the pursuit of excellence, all the sacrifices that have to be made, all the things that they have to give up, and the relentless nature and the strive for perfection. And then looking for those in our lives, trying to make sure that in every day we're getting better. That's where the inspiration comes in. I watched that fight and I thought to myself, man, I want to get better every day. I want to be better. I want to pursue the things that I love with this type of dedication and this type of drive and discipline. And it ultimately, it's a reflection of all of us, right? Because we all have goals, we all have dreams, and we're all, going through life trying to achieve things, right? And so when you see somebody who's been so perfect in that pursuit, you appreciate it so much, and it's so inspiring. So, from the Fight or Flight podcast, I just want to thank everybody who was involved. I want to thank Justin. I want to thank Khabib. It's really sad to see him leave, but I really hope that we get to see him again. Probably not, but again, just an inspiration, and for me personally, just watching that again, I've watched that fight no less than 7-8 times. This is not even the longest fight in the world, right? So it's very easy to get through the whole thing, and just watching it again just really inspired, and I think it's a moment that I will always remember. It's one of those that you wish you were in the arena for as well, right? So hopefully we get to see fans back soon. Okay, so I'm going to quickly cover the Robert Whittaker fight. That fight went, again, pretty much exactly the way I predicted that it would go. So if you get a chance, please go listen to the preview podcast. Robert was able to control distance. He was able to find a range with the jab early, and was able to do some, a lot of good work with that jab. I thought Jared Cannonier would if he was going to win, he would have to land the power. But I thought Robert would be very dynamic. We even saw him mixing the takedown. I thought it was a flawless performance as well from Robert. I thought his confidence was back. After that Israel fight against Darren Till. I thought it was very KJ affair. You could tell that he was just his confidence wasn't what it used to be, and I'm not saying he doubted himself, but after, if you in your last fight you were champion and you were knocked out and you've had a little bit of a hiatus and you're coming back, just getting yourself back in your groove. And I thought in this fight he definitely found his groove. I thought the first round was close. I scored that for Robert. I thought the second round was a definite win. I even thought he won the third round. I know some judges gave the third round to Cannonier. Maybe the first round actually. Maybe they gave him the first round. But I thought it was 30-27 across the board. But again, I did predict that they would give Cannonier at least one round. So, great work from Robert. At the end of the fight, he says, that he's going to fight Israel at some point. He doesn't know if it's going to be now. I think that's the fight that makes the most sense. If Israel is staying, in the division, if Robert is going to take some time, then I think it probably makes sense for Israel to move up and probably face John Jones. I don't think the light heavyweight division can afford to can afford that super fight right now. John Jones has been the champion for however long, decades. He's been the champion for a very, very long time is what I'm trying to say. And so, you probably want a few more contenders in there to get used to fighting. If he fights Yan for the light heavyweight title and he wins, is he then going to be champion going back and forth? Is he going to, give the belts back, which just causes even more chaos? So I think from that perspective, the fight that makes sense, if it's not Robert Whittaker, which I think is the fight that makes the most sense, but Robert says he wants to take some time because his wife is pregnant, and he might not be available till mid next year. So I think at that time, John Jones versus Israel makes sense. I do not think Israel is ready for that fight. When I say ready, I don't necessarily mean like he can't win that fight. I mean, I don't know if he is ready to take the fight yet. I think he probably wants to wait for that fight a little bit more, maybe beat a few more people in the division. I think John would be itching to take that fight because the longer time passes, the better Israel is going to get at a lot of other things that are not striking, and the harder it's going to be for John to impose his will in that fight. I don't think John is going to want to get into a pure kickboxing fight with Israel in this. I think he's going to want to impose his will, so use a lot of his wrestling, use his grappling advantage against Israel. And I'm pretty sure John, I don't know what his grappling is like, but just based on the amount of time that he's been a champion and he's been fighting, I imagine his grappling is phenomenal and better than Israel's. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you once again for listening to another episode of the Fight or Flight podcast. Please follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. The handle is Fight Flight MMA. That's Fight Flight MMA. Please follow us on Twitter as well as YouTube as well. I put up a bunch of breakdown videos on YouTube. The channel's called MMA Central. Thank you for listening and have a great day.